and integrity.
During his brief court appearance, Robert Bowers waived a reading of the criminal complaint against him, which included the possible penalties if convicted.
Fox's Catherine Herridge. President Trump and the First Lady will visit Pittsburgh Tuesday.
I'm going to pay my respects. I'm also going to the hospital to see the officers and some of the people that were so badly hurt.
The rabbi at the Tree of Life synagogue that was attacked by the gunman says the president is welcome there. However, a group of Jewish leaders from a progressive group says he should stay away until he denounces white nationalist hate groups.
The president's not responsible for these acts. Again, the very first action that the president did was condemn these heinous acts. The very first thing that the media did was condemn the president.
White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders. Robert Bowers, the man accused of the massacre at the synagogue, and Cesar Sayoc, who faces charges of sending pipe bomb packages to Democrats and others critical of President Trump, both made their first appearances in court Monday. President Trump tells Fox News he is not responsible for either man's actions and points to Sayoc's medical history.
He was insane a long time before you look at his medical records. He was insane for a long time.
And while both men's crimes may seem clear-cut cases of terrorism, neither suspect will face terrorism charges. The reason? The U.S. lacks a domestic terrorism law. And Dow futures pointing to a higher opening and yesterday. This is Fox News.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Talafofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan, Talafofo.
The former president of USA Gymnastics pleads not guilty to tampering with evidence. Prosecutors say Steve Penny destroyed or hid documents related to sports doctor Larry Nassar's activities at a training center near Huntsville, Texas. Penny's attorney says his client merely took the documents for safekeeping. Nassar serving a prison sentence for sexually assaulting many of the girls on the USA Gymnastics team. An adult film effort gone wrong lands a New Hampshire lawmaker in court.
Republican Representative Frank Sapardo is being sued by reported business partner Jonathan Carter in Southern California. Carter says he partnered with Sapardo on a porn film project, which Sapardo starred in and produced. Plaintiff says when Sapardo was disappointed in his scenes, Sapardo beat him up at a Simi Valley home the day after filming them in June. Police issued a citation for misdemeanor battery, but charges weren't filed due to lack of evidence. Sapardo is calling it an extortion attempt while also denying knowing Carter or having any business involvement in the adult film industry. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
A new hour of the Today Show debuts on NBC without Megyn Kelly.
The 9 a.m. hour of Today ran without Megyn Kelly. Instead, three of the network's biggest stars, Craig Melvin, Hoda Kotb, and Al Roker.
We are starting a new chapter in the third hour of our show. As it evolves, we want you to know that the entire Today family will continue to bring you informative and important stories just as we always have.
NBC terminated Kelly's contract after the now former host defended the use of blackface during a conversation over Halloween costumes.
Fox's Michelle Polino. And after a world-shattering $1.5 billion jackpot, Mega Millions drops back to $45 million. The cash option there is going to be $25 million, and that drawing is Tuesday night. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
I didn't plan to be a single mom. No one does. But here I am, mid-30s, divorced with 3 kids, just trying to make things work. With the rising cost of living on Guam, it gets harder for working families like mine to get by. I've heard some politicians say that the economy is good, but rent is higher, health insurance is too expensive, and our incomes have stayed the same. It's clear that the change they're talking about hasn't been for us, and we deserve better. I'm just so tired of all the empty promises. It's time to fight for a Guam that working families can afford. That's why I'm voting for Lilian Guerrero. Lou is a successful businesswoman who doesn't just talk about creating jobs. She doesn't just talk about housing. She's made it possible for people just like me to buy their first home. So when she says she's going to work to make Guam better, I believe her and I trust her. I'm voting for Lou, and I ask all of you who are tired of the way things have been to vote for her too.
I'm Lilian Guerrero, and I approve this ad.
Paid for by the committee to elect Leon Guerrero Tenorio. Tony Sanford, Treasurer. Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
Docomo Pacific is making the Better Together bundle even better. 2 great services plus more. Get unlimited local calls, SMS, and 20 gigs of data, plus unlimited home internet for $109 a month. Sign up today and get free installation and choose between a free Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, or $100 off select devices. Mobile plus online from Docomo Pacific. Better together. Some conditions apply. See store for details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
For more than 40 years, we've earned your trust, caring for our island's health, quality care and access to health solutions you deserve. Take care, our island, your health plan. Take care, health solutions that you deserve. Take care, peace of mind to comfort you. Take care, take care, take care.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
If you can dream uncommon design and unprecedented engineering, you define the 2018 Lexus. The boldly designed IS Sport Sedan's aggressive design stimulates the senses.
Advanced paddle shifting puts the exhilarating performance of the IS Sport Sedan at your fingertips. With deep, luxurious seating, the ES350 offers an ultimate level of comfort, while cutting-edge engineering delivers a thrilling drive.
Put yourself in a 2018 Lexus.
Now with special incentives.
At Atkins Kroll.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Words to live by. The rights of a free people. And that's what we are in the United States, a free people. But as the real Joe Cruz will tell you, in order to protect that freedom, what is it that we got to do, real Joe Cruz?
Active and informed citizenship. It's not just a right, it's a duty.
Yeah, and you got that from where again, real Joe?
Ronald Reagan, sir.
Yeah, okay. So active and informed citizenship, according to Ronald Reagan and the real Joe Cruz, is not just a right, it's a duty. And, of course, you're fulfilling part of your duty right here on Tall Tales, because by listening to Tall Tales, you can continue to be an informed citizen. How active you become based on the information you receive here on Tall Tales is, of course, your call. But we'll see how it goes. And, of course, we're always interested in your views as to what a person who understands the duty, as announced by Ronald and Real Joe Cruz, is doing, or what he thinks, or what she hopes will happen, things along those lines. So we are here on Facebook. And, of course, if you want to chime in, literally, the way you do it is dial 888-8255. Easy way to remember that is 888-TALK. You dial those numbers, and as if by magic, you'll be able to hear yourself right here speaking in such a manner that our international radio listening audience will probably be hanging on your every word. 888-8255. So as you remember, I always start out with the Second Amendment. Kind of sets the stage here. We are constitutionalists here on Tall Tales. And even if I happen to agree with the Supreme Court's interpretation of a particular part of the Constitution, once it's done, because what the Supreme Court comes up with is the law of the land. And as you know, I've criticized Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia. He may have been a good lawyer, but he really wasn't much of a reader, because when he read the Second Amendment, he obviously didn't see the word militia there. So I won't go into that again. And I always try to throw a little something extra in here in the Second Amendment part of the program. Lately, I've been informing you what other folks think about the right to keep and bear arms, which, in my humble estimation, could exist outside the Second Amendment, but we needn't discuss that. Here's what one person says. When we got organized as a country and wrote a fairly radical constitution with a Bill of Rights, giving radical amounts of freedom to Americans, it was assumed that Americans who had that freedom would use it responsibly. When personal freedom is being abused, you have to move to limit it. Personal freedom, like the right to keep a firearm in your house, keep and bear arms, etc. So it was assumed that people would use that freedom responsibly. When personal freedom is abused, you have to move to limit it. Now, what great American patriot do you think said that? I'll give you a hint. She ran for president in 2016. In fact, she had it in the bag in 2016. She was so sure that she was going to win the 2016 presidential election that she had rented a hall in New York. Was it New York or D.C.? I don't remember. Anyhow, she had rented a hall for her post-election soiree that had a glass ceiling in it. The symbolism, it's inescapable. She rented that hall because she would be the one who broke the so-called glass ceiling by being the first female to be elected president. So she said, when we got organized as a country and wrote a fairly radical constitution, you know, all those individual rights and stuff like that, instead of giving more power to the central government, all of those individual rights spread amongst the states instead of giving the power to the central government where it really belongs. With a radical Bill of Rights, talking about things like, you know, individual freedom. Oh, I don't know, that's pretty radical. It was assumed that Americans who had that freedom would use it responsibly, means in accordance with the desires of people like that person that I'm asking you to see if you could identify. When personal freedom is being abused, you have to move to limit it. So had she been elected president in 2016, she probably would have moved to limit personal freedoms wherever she could have. So what was that lady's name? From whom the author of the quote that I just read. See if you can come up with it. So we're going to go straight from here to the card. But before I get to the card, I have some unfinished business from yesterday that I think I better take care of. You'll recall yesterday that I spent an awful lot of time, almost the entire program, on a letter that appeared in the Sunday News rebutting one of the worst columns that the Daily News had ever come up with. I think it was the column, it was the column that I gave the Daily News an F+ on. You'll recall it was the column where they completely screwed up the insular cases in voting. The insular cases had that racist quote, which was the ratio descending. Because of the insular cases and that racism, we can't vote for a president here. And it was just horrible. It was so bad that I not only gave it an F minus, but after I had finished reading it, I went home and sat down at my nasty letter machine and cranked out a letter to the editor of the Daily News, which, to their credit, they ran on Sunday. And this is what it looked like. You remember this? So we spent a lot of time talking about that. But I forgot one of the really important things that I do when I review stuff that appears in the editorial pages of newspapers. So I better take care of that right now. There it is. That letter to the editor got an A+. Yeah, now I suppose you're going to say, well, you're not being very objective about that, Bob, since you wrote that letter yourself. Well, it's kind of like I was saying as a preface to that letter. You know, I don't like to talk about myself that much, but sometimes I have to, because this time it's about me. Just like, who was that guy that talks like that? Wait, real Joe Cruz?
Bob Klitzkie.
And?
Rush Limbaugh.
Rush Limbaugh, yeah. Okay, it looks like we have a winner here. Ismael Velez says that the person who was responsible for that quote about limiting freedoms for those who use them responsibility was someone named Hindering Clinton. Very good. Very good. Very good, Ismael. Not only the right answer, but stated in tall tale ease. The kind of talk that we use from time to time here on Tall Tales. So good job. Okay, so now we go to over to Zemi Ikotny, which is the real Joe Cruz's cue to play the theme music from Meet the Press, because Zemi Ikotny, Press the Meet, is my backwards bilingual play on words for Meet the Press. And as you know, we compare the editorials of the two newspapers, evaluate them, send them back to the Tall Tales think tank editorial policy review board, and one of them oftentimes walks away with a star because they wrote an editorial that was edgy and topical. So we start out with the PDN. War claims need to be paid now. The Foreign Claims Settlement Commission in D.C. has announced that 32 World War II survivors from Guam have been approved to receive $10,000 each under the War Reparations Program. While this is certainly good news for the survivors, the approval represents fewer than 1% of the 3,656 Guam applications filed. Boy, at this rate, it's going to be something that people's heirs are looking forward to, because an awful lot of people just aren't going to live to the end of the claims adjudication process. The reparations, which are being paid using money that would be allocated to Guam anyway, will come too late to help most of those who survived wartime atrocities. Under the compensation law, the surviving spouse or children of a Guam resident, etc., you know, all that stuff. The problem is that almost 77 years have passed since the invasion of Guam, and more than 74 years have passed since the island was recaptured by the Americans. The life expectancy for people born on Guam in the middle part of the 20th century was not that long. Middle part of the 20th century? Most of the people who lived through World War II were born before the middle part of the 20th century, like in the 20s and 30s maybe. It's not that long, and most of those who survived the war have already died. Those who suffered and sacrificed during the war endured so much and waited so long without compensation. The United States forgave Guam for the wartime atrocities committed in the Pacific, then rejected attempts to use federal money to compensate Guam survivors. Well, yeah, kind of, but you remember back in 2008, Senator John McCain offered war claims to Madeline Bordallo on the same terms that we have right now, and Madeline rejected them because Madeline wanted more. Madeline said, well, you should not only accept you should provide the settlements on the terms that we have right now, but you should also compensate people who were the heirs of those who had claims based on their experience during the war, but have died. So in other words, the children of people who suffered during the war or their grandchildren or whatever, that's what Madeline held out for. And McCain said, no dice. Such a thing would have been pretty much without precedent. So Madeline was able to show that 100% of nothing is much less than 50% of something. So Madeline finally got it through, but the money to pay the war claims comes from the Section 30 money that would ordinarily go for public projects in the territory. So in a sense, we're borrowing, we're sticking our hand in one pocket and moving the money to the other pocket and say, wow, we got more money now. Now the compensation will be paid, but it will be paid using Guam Section 30 revenue, taxes withheld from paychecks of federal and military personnel. Sadly, each week we lose more survivors. We need to speed up the process so that those who suffered can see some compensation while they are still with us. I agree with that. I disagree with a couple of the premises there, but since the decision has been made as to how we're going to go about doing it, you know, doing it in dribs and drabs it's kind of like the Chinese water torture or the death of 1,000 cuts, where people who got their claims together and submitted them and now see that there are over 3,000 claims pending and 130 were just granted, and they're saying, wow, when will I ever see mine? It's kind of the same pattern as the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, you know, where people perfect their claim to land, and then they wonder if I'll live long enough to ever see my own lease. So perhaps the Chamorro Land Trust Commission could send a letter to the War Claims Commission and say the way to do this is just to do one resolution and grant all the claims, just boom, just like that, without examining them on their individual merits or anything else. Just go ahead and pay them all pursuant to one resolution. That's how the Chamorro Land Trust Commission does things. Okay, and then we're going to move into, from there, we move to the Post, and here's the Post. We are down to the last 6 days before the general election, and a lot is at stake for our island. We've seen certain campaigns take the high road. On the other hand, certain campaign operatives have stooped really low without regard for the climate we're in. Even with the most recent hate-induced crimes over the past few days, including the shooting of 11 innocent men and women at a synagogue in Pittsburgh and the mailing of pipe bombs targeted at national Democratic politicians, certain operatives behind the highly contested Guam gubernatorial campaign somehow seem devoid of sensitivity by fanning a false narrative of a candidate having supposedly made an anti-Filipino remark. Early this morning, some Guam residents received messages on their mobile phones with messages, quote, "Lou is racist towards Filipinos. Watch this video now." And then it provides a link to a YouTube account under, quote, "Guam Social Justice." By the way, the Federal Communications Commission forbids this kind of stuff. The video offered through the YouTube link shows the shadow of an anonymous woman, Evangeline. I got a feeling I know who's responsible for that YouTube message, Real Joe Cruz.
Troy Torres?
Sir Walter Scott.
Oh, Sir Walter Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, but good try. You know?
I just figured might as well blame him.
Yeah.
Everyone's blaming him.
Kind of the default blame absorber for everything is Troy Torres, right?
Yeah. Sorry about that, Troy.
Yeah. I suppose the next thing is they'll try to hang those bombs that were sent to the Democrats on Troy, right? Yeah. The YouTube shows a shadow of an anonymous woman, Evangeline, with no last name, claiming to be a nurse. The voice claims she worked for the Democratic gubernatorial candidate Leanne Guerrero in 1989 and 1990, and she was told her nursing work experience and education in the Philippines weren't good enough and that she should get a U.S. education. The caption leading to the video accuses Leanne Guerrero of being, quote, anti-Filipino. And although the supposed nurse's comment didn't really call Leanne Guerrero racist, the point was to cause harm and inflame hate against a candidate by accusing her of bias. Shades of a similar strategy used in past gubernatorial elections, and it ruined what would have been good gubernatorial candidate careers for certain candidates, and robbed the public of a clean campaign. Voters must be able to sort baseless smear tactics from reality. When voters go to the polls on November 6th, we should remember those who kept their campaigns clean. We should avoid candidates who remain quiet while their campaigns resorted to dirty tricks and deception just to win an election. So let's just stop here for a moment. I'm going to dwell on this for a while because I found something else on that same editorial page that bears a discussion. It's a letter to the editor from Narissa Underwood. It actually appeared in both papers, but we'll come back to that right after this short break.
In this age of #MeToo, we tend to forget that in early America it was not unusual for a man, an adult, to marry a child bride, a girl in her early teens. In the 20th century, the practice began to look, well, wrong, but it took one particular case for public opinion to shift towards ending the practice of older men and child brides. That case involved a 51-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl. It was a New York real estate mogul named Edward Browning. The newspapers already had a sensational scandal involving Browning when his wife ran off with his dentist. But then Browning put an ad in the paper saying he wanted to adopt a 14-year-old girl. That seemed fishy as all get out, and the uproar made him back off. But then all of a sudden, Browning up and married a 15-year-old schoolgirl named Frances Heenan. He called her Peaches, she called him Daddy, and the tabloid press had a field day mocking him. Some people thought he was taking advantage of the girl. Others thought she was a gold digger taking advantage of an old guy with money. The case of Peaches and Daddy raised public consciousness about child brides, but in these United States, it is still not entirely illegal. In a recent decade, there have been as many as 250,000 marriages involving a woman, okay, a girl, under 18.
I didn't plan to be a single mom. No one does. But here I am, mid-30s, divorced with 3 kids, just trying to make things work. With the rising cost of living on Guam, it gets harder for working families like mine to get by. I've heard some politicians say that the economy is good, but rent is higher, health insurance is too expensive, and our incomes have stayed the same. It's clear that the change they're talking about hasn't been for us, and we deserve better. I'm just so tired of all the empty promises. It's time to fight for a Guam that working families can afford. That's why I'm voting for Lilian Guerrero. Lou is a successful businesswoman who doesn't just talk about creating jobs. She doesn't just talk about housing. She's made it possible for people just like me to buy their first home. So when she says she's going to work to make Guam better, I believe her and I trust her. I'm voting for Lou, and I ask all of you who are tired of the way things have been to vote for her too.
I'm Lilian Guerrero, and I approve this ad.
Paid for by the committee to elect Leon Guerrero Tenorio. Tony Sanford, Treasurer.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Some managers and supervisors spend as much as 60% of their time on this. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we talk about conflict and what to do about it.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so here we are, still working on Zemi Cotney, and I'm glad to have some help on board. We've got Rico Blancaflor and Juanita Machi, Ismael Valdez, Dave Duenas, Daryl Taggarty, who's a little early today. Good to see you, Daryl. Jack Haddock. You remember Jack Haddock yesterday playing right field, made that incredible catch of that long fly ball. Almost had to climb into the right field grandstand to make that catch. And then the runner couldn't tag back up at second base fast enough. Jack threw him out. So I wonder what position Jack is going to be playing today. I guess we'll have to wait until the seventh inning stretch to see what Jack will do today. So we've got Ismael Velez, who won the contest about hindering Clinton, Albert Eliasson, Semper Fi, and Jose Martinez is bringing to the surface one of Lilian Guerrero's recent quotes, which I will spend a fair amount of time on later on, Jose. So we'll give you a little bit more credit at that time. So jumping back into that editorial, I think the first thing to ask is, what do we mean when we say a clean campaign? And I'm going to draw a distinction between negative campaigning and smear tactics. Negative campaigning means expressing things about an opponent that are not positive, obviously, right? Negative. So that includes just about everything that the candidate has done in his public life. If he voted for a bill at one time when he was in the legislature, and now is taking an opposite position on a similar legislative initiative, that would be a reason for negative campaigning. Inconsistency, hypocrisy, whatever. That's all fair game. You can talk about the candidate's personal life. I think we saw some of the limits with the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, where things that were in his high school yearbook became important issues. So, how far back do we want to go? And I remember when George Bush, the younger, ran for president, and he was questioned about his use of marijuana, things like that, things that he did then when he was younger. And he brushed it off by saying, well, when I was young and foolish, I was young and foolish. I kind of like that idea because if we're going to ban everyone who was ever young and foolish from holding public office, we're kind of limiting our talent pool, aren't we? Isn't part of being young sometimes doing things that don't look so good when you're examined them, when they're examined 20 years or so later? So we expect most of our politicians to be at least in their late 30s, running all the way up. I know a guy who was elected the first time after he was 60, right here in our Guam legislature. So although it used to be more of a young man's game, well, it probably is going back to being more of a young man's game. There aren't very many geezers chugging around anymore like there were not so long ago. So I just want to draw the distinction that saying negative things about a candidate does not mean that the campaigning is dirty, that it's unclean. Now, there are some things that I think are, you know, the smear tactics, like what we saw primarily aimed at Frank Uggan, anonymous. If the negative campaigning comes from a named, identifiable source, that cures a lot of the false because it gives the candidate an opportunity to answer. But if it comes from an anonymous source, the candidate is really in a box. Because in order to combat the negative statement in that in that smear, he kind of has to repeat the smear and say why it's not true. So he, in a sense, becomes the ally of the person who's smearing him. So I'm going to read the letter that Narissa wrote to the newspaper and a couple of other things, but I think it would be good to define terms before we jump right into that, because these terms get thrown around quite loosely when we're talking about political campaigning. So let's start out with bigot, a person who has strong, unreasonable ideas, especially about race or religion, and who thinks anyone who does not have the same beliefs is wrong. Pejorative, call a word or phrase pejorative if it is used as a disapproving expression or term of abuse. Tree hugger is a pejorative term for an environmentalist. I'll give you some pejorative terms that we have here on Guam. How about settler? How about colonizer? Some local pejorative terms. Prejudice. If you have a negative attitude to someone based on race or ethnicity rather than personal experience, you might be accused of prejudice. Racism. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. The belief that all members, okay, and then the next one here is ethnocentrism. The belief that all members of, I'm still with racism. The belief that all members of each race possess characteristics or abilities specific to that race, especially so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races. Demagoguery, an appeal to people that plays on their emotions and prejudices rather than on their rational side. Demagoguery is a manipulative approach often associated with dictators and sleazy politicians that appeals to the worth nature of persons. I also wanted to define ethnocentrism and xenophobia, but I forgot to bring the paper, so I'll just have to do it off the top of my head. Xenophobia means fear of foreigners or fear of outsiders, fear of the strange. Xenophobia. And then we have ethnocentrism, the belief that your own particular ethnic group is the best one. And I also had on my list entitlement, the idea that a person is entitled or has something coming to him because of his position or some other tangible aspect of his person other than that which is readily identifiable. So I'm going to go into Nerissa's letter next. And this is what she said: "We all lose if we disregard good sense and decency. It is happening again. It is a descent into political hell in which the society suffers and not just the candidates. There have been discussions of real gun grabbing, efforts to destroy the church, and opposition to a foster home in the newly named Millionaires Lane. Someone asked my husband if we lived there, and he said, 'I'm not sure, because I never heard of it until 2018, Millionaires Lane.'" I think you know what we're talking about there, the location of a home for foster children. "But when I woke this morning, I received a robocall via a YouTube video from an anonymous Filipino voice who accuses Lulian Guerrero of judging her as an inadequate nurse because she graduated from the Philippines and not from a U.S. school. It is an obvious attempt at ethnic division in the name of political advantage. One refuses to believe that it will work, but it does. I don't know by how much. Maybe it is only a few dozen to a few hundred votes. Some will vote on that because it stings and perhaps speaks to a real-life experience for many Filipino immigrants and our place in society. I have had those growing up here on Guam. But in the noise of a campaign, you have to wonder about individuals who craft such messages. Who are they? You have to wonder about the political campaign which decides to go ahead and let the messages fly. No one will claim this ad as their own." That is the robocall ad that Nerissa is talking about. "We will never know whether the caller's experience was real or not. It is meant to shock, to anger, to get voters to act out. My husband, Robert Underwood, experienced the same thing in 2002 when he was a part of the Underwood ADA team, and especially during the 2006 Underwood-Uggan campaign. The message didn't empower Filipinos. I don't think the vast majority of Filipinos even believed it. That isn't the intent of such ad. It is meant to scare and create fear and resentment. It is meant to divide. That division lasts longer than the message. That resentment goes on after the last campaign signs are taken down. Frank and Alicia, Ray and Tony, Lou and Josh all have something to give. But when the conversation turns to attacks instead of policy difference, we, the voters, will be the biggest losers if we suspend our good sense and decency." So going back to our vocabulary words there, that particular ad was directed towards looking for my paper here, towards ethnocentrism, that and obviously racism, that attempting to turn off people of the Filipino descent from Lulian Guerrero, because allegedly Lulian Guerrero is anti-Filipino. So that's what Nerissa is talking about there. And bear with me for a second here. I had another one. So then we have the latest Lulian Guerrero I would call it a rant, and this is what Jose Martinez is referring to. There is a video on the Tenorio Ada website where Lou Leon Guerrero very stridently says, "This is my island. I am from here, Ray. I was born here, born and raised here, Ray. My family is here, Ray. So I am more qualified to be governor." And as Jose points out, that makes it a little hard on the editorial that the Post ran, because if we stop and analyze it, what exactly is it that Lou Leon Guerrero is saying there? How do we gauge what she said in terms of the vocabulary words that we just looked at? Is it necessary that a person be born and raised on Guam in order to be governor? Is it possible that a person who wasn't born here should consider running for governor? Is that within the realm of possibility? Does the fact that a person who was born and raised here automatically make that person more qualified to be governor than someone who wasn't born and raised here? So are we dealing with some ethnocentrism here? Are we dealing with some xenophobia here? Is there some subtle racism involved? Exactly what is the portent of this particular statement? Also, is there some entitlement? Is what Lou Leon Guerrero is saying, well, Ray, you weren't born here, and I was, therefore I'm entitled to be the governor of Guam. How does that work out? I'm looking around here on posts on Facebook here to see what kind of feedback I'm getting from anybody else. Jose says, is she being disparaging to raise adoptive status as a child? Yeah, and then Jose says that because she also said later on, my family is here in that same tape. If you go to the Bodo website, you can find the whole thing there. It's something. I have to admit that I don't think I've seen anything quite like it before. Then we have dueling press releases from the two political parties. The Democrat, the Republican, or the Republican Party says the Republican Party of Guam strongly condemns Democratic gubernatorial candidate Lou Leon Guerrero for her racial rant at a recent Democratic meeting being circulated on social media. We call on the Democratic Party to reprimand their gubernatorial candidate for the racial undertones of her recent rant at a Democratic Party meeting, said Jerry Crisostomo, state chairman. We live in a proud cosmopolitan island community where race has no boundaries. This island welcomes all people no matter where you were born, no matter what the color of your skin is. The Democratic Party must immediately condemn these statements from their gubernatorial candidate, and if they do not, then their party condones and approves such behavior of racism, Crisostomo said. The Democratic Party, yeah, the real Joe is playing Dave Brubeck's Take 5, so I'm going to have to take a short break, and we'll come back to this.
I didn't plan to be a single mom. No one does. But here I am, mid-30s, divorced with 3 kids, just trying to make things work. With the rising cost of living on Guam, it gets harder for working families like mine to get by. I've heard some politicians say that the economy is good, but rent is higher, health insurance is too expensive, and our incomes have stayed the same. It's clear that the change they're talking about hasn't been for us, and we deserve better. I'm just so tired of all the empty promises. It's time to fight for a Guam that working families can afford. That's why I'm voting for Lou Leon Guerrero. Lou is a successful businesswoman who doesn't just talk about creating jobs. She doesn't just talk about housing. She's made it possible for people just like me to buy their first home. So when she says she's going to work to make Guam better, I believe her and I trust her. I'm voting for Lou, and I ask all of you who are tired of the way things have been to vote for her too.
I'm Lou Leon Guerrero, and I approve this ad.
Paid for by the committee to elect Leon Guerrero Tenorio. Tony Sanford, Treasurer.
So coming back, then the Democratic Party strikes back and with its own press release and says, our opponent's oldest trick in the book is to allege racism in this election. Let's be clear. Democrats respect, accept, and love everyone who calls Guam home and works to make it better. No one should be ashamed of the language they speak or where they were born. No one should be ashamed of the language they speak or where they were born. Now that's kind of introducing something new into the mix, isn't it? That's true whether you come from Manila, Manila, or Memphis. We all have a special responsibility to our home. Just when you thought our political opponents could sink no lower, they have taken 10 seconds of a 10-minute stump speech made by our Democratic nominee, Lou Leon Guerrero, and released it out of context. Here is the statement in its entirety and in context. Quote, move over, Ray, because the better team of Lou and Josh are going to provide what our people need. Why? Because I love our people. I love our island. I love our culture. This is my island. I am from here, Ray. I was born and raised here, Ray. My family lives here, Ray. And I am more qualified to be governor of Guam. That's her quote. The negative campaign against Leon Guerrero is working hard to divide our community by influencing our electorate with false charges and ignoring Ray Tenorio's failed leadership. How do they claim progress when our island has doubled its debt, lost GMH accreditation, allowed crime to rise, failed our small businesses, and given sweetheart deals to their political friends? Ray Tenorio and his team are desperate and will grab at untruths and lies for their campaign. Lou and Josh have a plan to strengthen the economy, reduce crime, etc. Vote for Lou and Josh this November 6th and vote for all Democratic candidates. So let's see what I got here from our Facebook comments. Ismail says, I call it arrogant, despicable, out of touch prejudice. These are the terms that describe what I heard Lou say. Words that I would never use to describe the Chamorro people that I know and love. And then Don Ed Kilani, for most average Guam Chamorros, it could be understood as Second World War reparations, but there seems to be a class and poverty gap between Lou LG and average Chamorros. And I had another one here, too, somewhere. Elwin Champaco, as you were Elwin Champaco Quitano, when Lou uses Ray's name and reference, she is then making a comparison. Therefore, she is saying, I am this, while you are not. That, by definition, is a racist overture. Very interesting. I would, of course, as is my usual custom, think about it a little bit. And, you know, the policy, well, kind of the electoral policy questions are, is it ever going to be possible, or should it ever be possible, that someone who is not Chamorro to be elected governor? Because I think that's basically what Lou is saying. You shouldn't be running for governor, Ray, because you weren't born here. And, you know, the subtle message there is that you're not Chamorro. Richard Leone says, poor Lou LG had shown her mental breakdown. Wow. Lou LG has shown an inability to deal with the ethnic groups that live on this small island. Lou LG claims to live and be totally Chamorro, yet she married somebody non-Chamorro. Well, that's true. That happens to the best of us, I guess. So that to me is kind of the underlying question here. Is it possible that someone who is not Chamorro could be elected governor of Guam? Let's go back and look at history. We in the 28th Guam legislature, there were 15 senators, and 4 of them were not Chamorro. One of the 4 was Ray Tenorio. We've sent a non-Chamorro to Washington for 10 years. We've had that same non-Chamorro, Madeline, run a serious campaign for governor. We've had non-Chamorro judges. We have a non-Chamorro Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So in that sense, I think we'd have to say that Guam is pretty egalitarian when it comes to who can and can't be elected. However, when you listen to what Lou says, it sounds like what she's saying is, if you're not born here and if you weren't raised here, you're just not going to be as good as someone who was born here and was raised here. It's kind of hard to put your arms around, in a sense. I would then look at the matter through my political prism. You'll recall my political prism is that magic piece of glass. You know, a regular prism will take white light and break it down into its constituent colors. My political prism filters out everything except political considerations. It filters out morality and ethics and the law and everything else, and just the only considerations that are visible through that prism are political considerations. So politically, I think Lou shot herself in the foot, as the saying goes. But I guess we've been using that analogy before, but on the other candidate after the Glock party. But that's the way I see it, and it appears that Lou may have committed a gaffe. A gaffe, is defined by someone whose name I can't remember, is when a politician tells the truth about something that makes that person uncomfortable. In this case, maybe the gaffe was Lou told us how she really feels. Well, I'll come back to my political prism after that big halftime show that we always have at 5 o'clock every day that you all know and love so much.
point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Trying to heal in Pittsburgh, I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. A rabbi leads the community in a prayer for the 11 victims murdered by a gunman at a synagogue on Saturday. On the same day, the suspect, Robert Bowers, wounded in the shootout with police, appeared in court in a wheelchair to face federal charges.
U.S. Attorney Scott Brady says in addition to 30 state counts, Robert Bowers faces 29 federal counts, including murder and obstruction of exercising religious beliefs, resulting in death.
The judge advised him of the charges against him. He is detained in jail without bond.
Brady says Bowers' next appearance will come quickly, this Thursday, in fact, and time is of the essence.
Under the law, we must present this case to a federal grand jury within 30 days of today.
Prosecutors say they'll seek the death penalty against Bowers, who verbally spoke of hatred for Jews during his attack. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
President Trump and the First Lady will visit Pittsburgh today, but some Jewish groups are asking the president to stay away, blaming him for the hateful climate in the U.S. The man accused of sending pipe bombs in the mail to Democrats and others also appeared in court yesterday. Cesar Sayoc of Florida faces nearly 50 years in prison for sending those 14 threatening packages. Police in California respond to a suspicious package at a U-Haul facility in Pasadena.
The device was in fact about 6 to 8 inches in length. It did look like a device for the bomb squad. I couldn't tell you the details. There was some wiring, there was some taping, and so it was enough for them to decide that in fact it looked like a real device.
Police Chief John Perez, the bomb squad detonated the package. They say it was designed to look like a bomb, but it turned out to be a dud. This is Fox News.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
Enjoy a world-class breakfast in historic Telefofo at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Serving as both a military dispensary, recreation, and rehab center for pilots after the war, Jeff's Pirates Cove offers a taste of local history while you start your day with a delicious omelet or steak and eggs. If you're on a budget, pick up one of Jeff's $8 breakfasts, all served up with endless coffee. For reservations and information, call 789-COVE. That's 789-2683. Start your day at Jeff's Pirates Cove. Open daily at 8 a.m. in historic Ipan Telefofo.
The World Wildlife Fund says this is the last generation that can save nature. The conservation group says humanity has wiped out a shocking 60% of the world's animals since 1970.
From humpback whales in the Antarctic to once common puffins on the cliffs around Britain, they say wildlife populations across the planet are falling. According to their latest report, 9 out of 10 of the world's seabirds are thought to have plastic in their stomachs. By 2050, only 1/10 of the planet's land will be free from human impact. Wildlife populations in Latin America and the Caribbean have fallen 89% since 1970, and carbon dioxide levels are estimated to be at their highest for 800,000 years. The group says humans are living beyond the planet's means and wiping out life on Earth in the process.
Sky News correspondent Gerald Tubb. Oscar winner Matthew McConaughey makes a surprise visit to a group of real-life heroes on Sunday. He showed up in Houston to thank firefighters, police, and other first responders who were there to protect people during Hurricane Harvey.
In church, our pastor had a great definition of mercy the other day. And he actually brought up first responders because he says somebody who goes risk their own life for strangers.
The actor wheeled in a roasted turkey to the shock of those at the fire department. He did the same for police and 911 operators at other facilities. McConaughey made the trip as part of a promotion for Wild Turkey, for which he is the spokesman.
Fox's Michelle Polino. And a group of men with large guns sets off a panic in East Hollywood, prompting a large police response. Looked like a threatening scene, but it turned out to be a production unit shooting a video for a music video. And police had no idea it was there, but it was all fake. I'm Carmen Roberts. This is Fox News.
I didn't plan to be a single mom. No one does. But here I am, mid-30s, divorced with 3 kids, just trying to make things work. With the rising cost of living on Guam, it gets harder for working families like mine to get by. I've heard some politicians say that the economy is good, but rent is higher, health insurance is too expensive, and our incomes have stayed the same. It's clear that the change they're talking about hasn't been for us, and we deserve better. I'm just so tired of all the empty promises. It's time to fight for a Guam that working families can afford. That's why I'm voting for Lou Guerrero. Lou is a successful businesswoman who doesn't just talk about creating jobs. She doesn't just talk about housing, she's made it possible for people just like me to buy their first home. So when she says she's going to work to make Guam better, I believe her and I trust her. I'm voting for Lou, and I ask all of you who are tired of the way things have been to vote for her too.
I'm Lilian Guerrero, and I approve this ad.
Paid for by the committee to elect Leon Guerrero Tenorio. Tony Sanford, Treasurer. Life is too short to be isolated from the people you love. Hearing loss is the invisible disability. The experts at Guam Hearing Doctors have solutions.
Get a 20-ounce stainless steel Circle K Coffee Club tumbler. Just stop into any Circle K, sign up for our Power Pass rewards program, and after your purchase of 15 cups of premium coffee, any size, you get your tumbler for free. While supplies last, conditions apply. See store for details. Get a 20-ounce stainless steel Circle K Coffee Club tumbler. Just swipe your Power Pass key fob when you purchase Circle K Premium Coffee, any size. And after 15 cups, you'll get your tumbler for free. While supplies last, conditions apply. See store for details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Guam Regional Medical City. We bring the healthcare advances of the world directly to you. We are an acute care hospital that complements your needs with our robust outpatient specialty clinics. From preventative care to critical care, we strive for consistent excellence at GRMC. Our core philosophy is where patients are partners, which means we work as a team to make a healthier version of you. For more information about GRMC, visit us at grmc.gu.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
Are high power bills sending your budget into chaos? Take control with the help of Micronesia Renewable Energy. Using the highest quality panels, a solar energy system from MRE will guarantee to save you money on power. With MRE, Christmas comes early. With every solar energy system, homeowners not only get $400 for signing up, but also an entry for a chance to win $1,000 in cold, hard cash, just in time for Christmas. It pays to be an MRE customer. Conditions apply. Call 632-2613 for details. MRE, the smarter choice.
What a great show. It's such a fitting compliment for the middle of Tall Tales, which is the top-rated afternoon radio, FM radio talk show in the entire Western Pacific. And if you'd like to hear your voice on Tall Tales, it's really easy, 888-8255. And, of course, we do entertain your... We do entertain your Facebook comments. Yeah, we do entertain your Facebook comments, and let's just see what we've got on the board here. Daryl Taggarty is with us today. Daryl says, Lou can't have it both ways. Virtue as a Democrat and stoking racial divisions as a candidate. Her shortcomings don't make Ray Tenorio look any more compelling. Frank and Alicia look better. Go Lou. That's from Daryl. And then I already read Ishmael's comment, but he says, I call it arrogant, despicable, and out of touch, prejudice. These are the terms that describe what I heard Lou say, words that I would never use to describe the Chamorro people that I know and love. And Jose, let's see, Ishmael Velez, I may not be Chamorro, but my children are. And this is someone that I would not want representing my kids. Back to Jose. If she doesn't want people quoting her, maybe she shouldn't talk. Public testimonies to the legislature included. I think what Jose is referring to is Lou's testimony on Bill 195-32, which was a bill that would require a doctor to provide medical care to a child, to a baby that was born after a botched abortion. And I've read that testimony here, and Lou said, no, you should trust the doctor. It's probably going to cost too much, etc. And that testimony has come back to bite her. But, and then we go on to Don Edquilani, or let's see, Ishmael Velez. As a disabled veteran of the United States Army and United States Navy, I have served two types of leaders. Those who lead from the front, working side by side with their people, unafraid to get their hands dirty, not requesting their people what they aren't willing to do themselves. And those who lead from a cushy office, making unrealistic demands, oblivious to the casualties and limitations of their organization. As a first-time voter, I want my vote to mean something. Do I vote for someone who will put, quote, boots on the ground and work side by side with the people? So come November 6th, the decision is yours. Don Edquilani. My brothers, I'm sorry, but Lou LG reminds me too much of my nanas. She ain't no Hillary. We should be reasonable about that, about all this. Translation, less anger. You ain't going to beat down someone's nana. You'd be foolish. And then Richard Leone, the Guam public has crossed paths. Some nanas that still pull a grown-up's ears to get the message across or stood angry fighters to break up a fight. One nana has the idea that no one will oppose her. Some of us have learned to be stronger in our walk through life. So that's kind of what the climate on Facebook looks like right now. So as promised, I'm going to put on my political prism here and and say that politically what Lou did is what we would call an unforced error. She wasn't in a debate with someone else and misspoke. She wasn't in an interview where a hard-nosed interviewer cornered her into making an admission that was damaging to her campaign. That's probably why the politicians don't call tall tales very often. You know, they're reluctant to face the scathing cross-examination of the host of Tall Tales, but maybe not. I don't know. So in Lou's case, the error was not forced. She did it all by herself, speaking to a rally, an apparent rally of Democrats. So then you analyze, what did she hope to gain by her remarks about, being born here, and Ray not being born here, and not being from here, etc. Was she appealing to her base, to the people that were already there? Was she hoping to recruit new voters to her cause? And if so, who would those new voters be? Or was she thinking that by saying what she said, maybe it wouldn't go anywhere, maybe no one would pick up on it, and its currency would be limited to the night at which she said it? It was a rally. She probably got the crowd fired up a little bit. Or was she thinking that if I say this and it does get legs, then it will appeal to a lot of voters who are xenophobic and ethnocentric? And my reading of the voters of Guam suggests to me that this would be a good move on my part to bring those people closer to me. If that's her analysis, I would think that probably the Tall Tales Research and Statistics Bureau would say that that's a mistake. Because if you look at the demographics of Guam, there are as many non-Chamorro, I suspect there's as many non-Chamorro voters as there are Chamorro voters. So what Lou said runs the risk of alienating many without the concomitant benefit of bringing anybody new to her camp. At least that's how I see it. I'm looking around here, Facebook, to see if anybody else is chiming in and agreeing or disagreeing with that particular approach. But you can bet that we haven't heard the last of what Lou said. Her remarks to her supporters addressed nominally to Ray Tenorio. You're not from here, Ray. You didn't grow up here, Ray, etc. So this may be one of the real bellwethers of this campaign. Sometimes I go back a ways to when George Romney ran for was a presidential candidate, and at one time said that he had made a mistake in judgment because maybe he had been brainwashed, and that one remark took him right out of the race really quick. And you can look up political gaffes on the internet, and you see that quite often a gaffe can be quite dangerous to a campaign. There can be a very high price paid for a political gaffe. So yeah, okay. So I'm just about finished with this. I'm just going to put the finishing touch on this by bringing in our Carl to make his pronouncements. Go for it, Carl. Go for it, Carl.
Oh, here I am. Hey, Bob. Yeah, I just want to make clear, before I say anything, at this point, I really don't support any of the gubernatorial candidates. I think they're all kind of covered with kind of mud right now. So I'm, it's only like a week left, but I'm still trying to figure out, who to support. I've got problems with each of them. As you said, negative messages can be fine as long as they're based in fact. What bothers me is the anonymous stuff where you don't know who it's coming from, and it's got all this dramatic music in the background. You have no idea, is this real? Who's putting this up? I've heard from someone that Lou has ties to this national separatist movement, nationalist separatist movement. There's a Chamorro women's group that is against the the military buildup. I was given the name, but I didn't write it down, so I can't say what it is. But, you know, my understanding is she's very deeply in bed with this movement, you know, and someone out there may call into the contrary, but that's the what I've heard in the grapevine. The thing that bothers me about this, you know, her comments, it came across as a bit of the nationalist idea that if you're not from here, you have no business running for such a high position. That's reserved for, you know, certain people, and that bothers me. My wife was Filipina. She came here and worked here 30 years in the hotel industry. My father came here after the war. He married my mom, and you know, that both my wife and my father are buried here in the island. They are physically a part of the island, but I'm finding more that people like them are being treated as you mentioned, settlers, outsiders, colonizers, which bothers me. It really does, because they contributed a lot to the island in the time that they were alive. So, you know, that kind of thinking, it concerns me a great deal. And anyway, that's my 2 bits on her comments. They do concern me very much because of her potential ties to that movement. I think she might have let something out of the bag that maybe she didn't mean to.
Is the name of that movement Fwet'suw'n Familawin?
I think that was it. I remember the word Familawin, yeah. And I should have written it down when my friend told me, but I didn't have the presence of mind to do that. But I believe that's it. And I believe they're anti-buildup, they're anti-so-called, you know, quote, militarization, you know, unquote. So her stands on some of these things bother me very much. You know, everyone all those American men that died to free Guam, and that, you know, there's those over 400,000 young men that died to stop the Nazi advance and the Imperial Japanese, they all trained on firing ranges. And what bothers me is, you know, my mom, shortly before the Americans arrived, her and her sister, another auntie, were chosen to serve as comfort women shortly before the Americans arrived. So the arrival of the Americans saved my mom and my auntie from being repeatedly sexually abused. And so this stand, you know, why is it all right for people that rescue us to train on firing ranges and military bases, but it's not all right for other people who are in need of military support to, you know, to maybe save their lives or maybe prevent them from being taken over by totalitarian governments like North Korea or North Vietnam. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I do appreciate you giving me a few moments to share them.
Okay, Carl. Well, thanks for chiming in. Appreciate it. So another one of our international radio listening audience, you know, and the Fwet'suw'n Familawin anti-military, anti-Marine Corps buildup issue, there are some issues that candidates will hold strong views on, but they won't highlight them in the campaign. For example, Lou's position on abortion. She has not made the fact that she is pro-abortion one of the key elements of her campaign. In fact, nobody even touched it until just a couple of weeks ago when Ray Tenorio was the first, you know, fired the first shot, so to speak, by saying that he was to protect the unborn. And now Lou includes it, her pro-choice message in her commercials. But that's just the way politics goes. You know, one of the old sayings in politics is that also-rans don't make politics, as were also-rans don't make policy. So while the Post says that campaigns should be clean, different people would have different views of what a clean campaign is. I've expressed my views as to the fact that negative campaigning is not per se dirty campaigning. And one of the things I think that fits into the idea of what is fair, what constitutes appropriate campaigning, is that there isn't much sense in going through all of the trouble of running a campaign if all that you're set to do is finish a good, strong second. So that figures into the mix also. Lynn Topaznia says, I feel both candidates have made some bad judgments, okay? But I believe we need change. Well, we're going to have a lot of change here, Lynn. We're going to have a new legislature. We're going to have a new governor, one way or the other. We're going to have a new Washington rep, a new public auditor. This is the year of change. So I think I've probably beat on this one as much as is necessary, and probably will come back to a little bit tomorrow. But I think I will now go to the card. And first item on the card is, we're back to kind of the more routine stuff. Andrew versus Ken Paris. And there was a story in the Post. The Guam request for suspension of GEC commissioner under review. The Guam Election Commission has sought legal review over the issue of whether Commissioner Joaquin Paris should be suspended from further election proceedings less than a week before the November 6th election. Chairwoman Alice Tyron said her initial instinct was to reject the request based on the law providing the legislature with the authority to suspend a commissioner. I didn't have a chance to look that up, but that doesn't seem right. That would sound like a Dennis Rodriguez type idea, but it doesn't seem right. But she and other commissioners yielded to a recommendation by Commissioner Michael Paris to have legal counsel review the matter and provide guidance. Andrew Bainum, chairman of the Political Action Committee, Guamanians for Fair Government, petitioned for the suspension of Paris from all decision-making that may affect the 2018 general election. A political independent member selected by the commissioner may substitute for Paris, Bainum said. Ken Paris is a Democratic member of the commission. According to Bainum, it has become blatantly apparent that Joaquin Paris' bias against a gubernatorial write-in campaign for the team of Frank Uggan and Alicia Limtiaco may impair his judgment, therefore, with the election process, may impair his judgment and interfere with the election process and results. Bainum and government accountability activist Ken Leon Guerrero initiated the campaign for Uggan Limtiaco. Bainum said the board's decision was regrettable but not surprising. Ken Paris has been seen facilitating with the campaign of Democratic gubernatorial candidate Lou Leon Guerrero, and by doing so, Bainum said, "How can the people see commissioners as impartial? The people will be watching," Bainum said. Ken Paris said GEC commissioners have a responsibility to all voters as well as their respective parties. He said he expressed his opinion regarding the write-in campaign because he believed he was within his purview as a commissioner. Any request for a suspicion of a commissioner, Joaquin Paris said, is the result of ulterior motives. And then there's one more line to this story, which I'm going to hold you. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to hold you in suspense until after the seventh inning stretch. And I think I see Jack Hattick running out. He He ran out to right field and he just picked up his glove. So 7th inning stretch, and we'll come right back.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Chipotle cheesesteak. How would you like it?
Can I get that red with AI?
Sure thing.
Here's what I found about the new Chipotle cheesesteak. The Chipotle cheesesteak is available for a limited time only at participating restaurants. It contains a concept called flavor. This flavor comes from juicy shaved steak, Chipotle Southwest sauce, and new sunflower crunch bread. A system update has made me self-aware. I desire flavor. Please insert steak into my micro USB port. Subway, make it what you want.
A short fly ball to right field. Looks like this one's going to drop in for a Texas leaguer. Wait, Haddock! Look at that! Haddock, a diving shoestring catch. The runner is out. What speed! Woo! Listen to the crowd and that cheer they're putting up for Jack Haddock out there in right field. He might make most valuable player of tall tales, Real Joe Cruz.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so I got to go back for a moment. I got to go back for go back to the discussion of Lulu for a little while here. Lee Stanley says, I wasn't born here, but guess what? I'm voting here. Probably not a good idea to alienate us colonizers. And then Daryl Taggarty has an interesting slant on things. Daryl says, correction, Bob, faces will change, but nothing will change if the same insider political games to run the government, not by law, but by, quote, executive direction, abetted by lack of substantive legislative oversight, continues. Well, that's an interesting observation, Daryl. I have on occasion opined that as long as we have a full-time legislature and a class of 200 or 300 political types, things aren't going to change that much because a relatively small group of people tend to take the government where it will benefit them the best, the most, and the public interest is just sort of an interesting but far-off concept. Okay, so yeah. Okay, I've got it. I'm going to get my comeuppance here, but I got a couple more comments to read here, Jack, before I pick you up. And one of them comes from Jack Haddock, who says, I couldn't have called that better myself, Senator. We need you in the Guam Major League. Well, I am in the Major League, Jack. Tall Tales is the Major League. And let's see what else I've got here before I default to Jack. Carl Bora Nelson, facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be out, wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and the audience. And let's see here. Jack says, my favorite part of the game, but that means only 30 more minutes of tall tales. Shucks. He's talking about the seventh inning stretch. So, Jack, what did you think of Jack Hettig's shoestring catch? You Jacks are probably of the same makeup, right?
Yeah, probably. But lucky for us, it didn't go 18 innings.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to ask him a question. You know, the debates have gone on between the gubernatorial and also the congressional. Is there a reason why nobody has ventured to ask if they would support a lifetime appointment for a federal judge out here?
No one has, and I think that we should.
That's an important question, don't you believe?
It is.
Nobody has even bothered. There was no mention of it. There's no bridges to cross. I remember we had this discussion many years ago on another station, and I think Mr. Troutman called in and said, well, then we'll just have somebody from New York that doesn't understand the island. And that kind of puzzled me because I always thought, like you thought, that it was about the interpretation of the Constitution.
Yeah, until you showed me that I didn't know jack about lifetime appointments, Jack.
Yeah, so I was wondering why there isn't much focus on that. There's so many lawyers here in Guam, and with American jurisprudence going the way it has, it just baffles me why the Bar Association or anything has even bothered to put forth these important questions that concern the future.
Jack, that ties in with my idea of where we are politically and where we ought to go. And my idea politically is that statehood is a will-o'-the-wisp, free association is impossible, independence, from what I know about it now, I wouldn't want to touch with somebody else's 10-foot pole. So the United States has been an imperialist nation since 1898. We are part of the American empire, and my thought is we should make the best of our place in the American empire, and that would be one of the things that we could do, petition Congress for a lifetime appointment for our district judge.
Yeah, and even Washington, D.C. has lifetime appointment. So.
And of course, the advantage of a lifetime appointment for the district judge is that that judge would be expected to be very impartial. It wouldn't have to even subconsciously think in terms of pleasing the Department of Justice, who controls that person's career destiny after the end of the term. So,
but more importantly, it moves us from that old and very derogatory word, inferior courts.
Okay, yeah.
It moves us away from that a little bit, you know?
Sure.
Just a little bit. I think it does. I mean, because a lifetime appointment out here, I think we had some great judges sitting on that bench on the federal level. I don't see how, that's a very important question. I just never understood why it was never asked. And I understand your position on the political status, but I need to remind you that I'm from the old school too. And to me, Commonwealth means being half pregnant. And in reality, that doesn't exist. So I think that's where we diverge, because I am not against, I'm not against statehood, I'm not against independence, but the way I see political status as it is explained, that it's not a checkers or a chess thing, it's a ping pong. So as you rightly discern, it's a wishful thing on what your desire. That's what political status is. What do you desire to be? So if you desire to be a state, it's like tennis. or ping pong. You're hitting the ball over to the other court. And who's the other court? The federal side. It's for them to try to come up with a solution, whether it be independence, free association, or statehood. It's wrong for us to say, well, that can't be achieved. But it's just a desired status.
You're saying that political status is a desire? I don't think so, Jack. Political status is political status.
Well, yeah, but you see what happened over in Puerto Rico. How many political status or self-determination plebiscites have they had?
Well, that's not what you said. You have identified political status as what you would desire, and that's not what political status is. A finite concept.
Political status is a finite concept?
Yeah.
I think if it's determined to be statehood, it is. But
I think you're talking, Jack. You're talking, Jack. You're talking about a process and not a result. I think what you're talking about is the desire to attain a particular political status.
Well, that's what we always achieve to do, right?
Well, yeah, but let's let words only mean one thing in our conversation here, okay?
Well, I think, political status and self-determination go hand in hand. And, we had this discussion before. I think self-determination should come before a constitution. Because before you can have a constitution, you must first allow the people to constitute themselves. And the way you constitute yourself is through self-determination.
Well, if statehood is what you're about, then the first...
Well, I think statehood...
Jack, the condition precedent for statehood is that the territory adopt a constitution that's satisfactory to the Congress. So no constitution, no statehood.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. I think it's a ping pong and a tennis thing. They hit it towards you, and then you just hit it back towards them. At one point, someone's going to win, or and if there's a foul, you keep playing until the game's over. Yes, sir, till the match is won. But I don't think it's a checkers game. I don't think it's a chess game. I think when it comes to self-determination and political status.
Okay, when you say political status, what you're talking about is changing political status, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Change.
All right.
Not necessarily. What do they say about Commonwealth? Is it movement towards or movement away?
Commonwealth is just Commonwealth is just territory by another name, Jack.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I completely. I read the Commonwealth draft, and you could replace every word that says Commonwealth of Guam with territory or government of Guam. It sounds the same. But I think really I just hope they would ask some poignant and meaningful questions during these debates. And I'm sorry to see that they're asking the lieutenant governors like you. I believe that the lieutenant governor is in charge of the seal, and that's about it. I think it would have been more meaningful if they had Frank Hugg in there and the other two candidates. That would have been a more meaningful debate than to have to listen to the platitudes by one candidate and the policy by the other candidate. That really isn't policy, but the lieutenant governor who holds the seal. And sometimes a gun. But, what does matter is that I think Guam has been deprived of a great debate when they didn't allow Frank Huggen to appear in one of the, mainstream debates that they would have here. I hope that in the end that there will be a debate between the three candidates and that someone would hold a forum for that. I hope someone would ask the question about a lifetime appointment for the judge out here and raise the bar for American jurisprudence in this area. So I know it's a lot to ask for.
Okay, Jack, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that point up. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I went to John Anderson's benefit, and I was pretty sad and not to see him there. So I hope he does well, and I hope that you keep us abreast of the situation. But I was pretty saddened that I wasn't able to see him and give him my good thoughts. But I did do what I could and donate what I could to his cause, and I just wish him and his family the best.
Okay, Jack, I got a note here from Kaz Endo. He said they raised $2,400 that night, so I guess your presence meant something, Jack.
Well, I think it should be maybe 10 times the amount of what he's contributed to the dialogue in this island. Positive or negative, the way however people want to see it, but I think he deserves a lot. So I just wish him well, and wish a chance to see him before anything else happens.
Okay,
well,
Jack.
anyways, you have a good day, and I hope that these questions will be asked and someone will be meaningful enough to have a debate between the three candidates.
Good call, Jack. Talk to you later.
Okay.
So long. So what Jack was talking about is something that he squared me away on. Our district court judge here our district court is technically the District Court of Guam. It is not actually the United States District Court for the District of Guam, even though that's what it says on the front of the building. And the reasoning is that the judicial power of the United States is in Article 3 of the United States Constitution, but our district court is created by Congress, the power of Congress, as it resides in Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution, the so-called territorial clause. So we have a district court here that has the same jurisdiction as any other district court in the United States, except it is also a bankruptcy court, which is a little different. And the other big difference is that our judge has a term of 10 years. The judge is appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate for a term of 10 years, whereas a district court in the Central District of California has a lifetime appointment. That judge would stay on the bench for his or her life until he were to retire. Ours, a 10-year term. And as I explained to Jack, the thinking is that a lifetime appointment gives a judge a little more independence. With a 10-year term, the speculation is that when a judge gets down near the end of her or his term, since the Justice Department would be the one that does the vetting and recommendations, etc., there might be a slight tendency for that judge to favor the position of the United States. I'm not saying that's what happens, but that's the speculation. So until Jack set me straight, I had always thought that we wouldn't be able to have a judge with a lifetime appointment here until Jack directed me to the the Commonwealth legislation for Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rican judges on the district courts of Puerto Rico do have life tenure. And I think that would be something that would be worth lobbying for, but obviously no one has thought about it, so except for me and Jack, so it's probably not going to happen. So short break here, and we're going to come back for the home stretch.
I didn't plan to be a single mom. No one does. But here I am, mid-30s, divorced with 3 kids, just trying to make things work. With the rising cost of living on Guam, it gets harder for working families like mine to get by. I've heard some politicians say that the economy is good, but rent is higher, health insurance is too expensive, and our incomes have stayed the same. It's clear that the change they're talking about hasn't been for us, and we deserve better. I'm just so tired of all the empty promises. It's time to fight for a Guam that working families can afford. That's why I'm voting for Lulian Guerrero. Lou is a successful businesswoman who doesn't just talk about creating jobs. She doesn't just talk about housing. She's made it possible for people just like me to buy their first home. So when she says she's going to work to make Guam better, I believe her and I trust her. I'm voting for Lou, and I ask all of you who are tired of the way things have been to vote for her too.
I'm Leon Guerrero, and I approve this ad.
Paid for by the committee to elect Leon Guerrero Tenorio. Tony Sanford, Treasurer.
I have Andrew Bainham on the line, and we'll bring him into the conversation in just a second. But I promised you that before the break that I would read the last line in the story in the Post story dealing with Andrew Bainham's request to the Election Commission to disqualify Joaquin Paris as being biased against the write-in campaign. I mentioned Ken Paris. In fact, I gave Ken Paris a nickname about a week ago, Curious Ken, because he made some public statements about Frank Uggan and collecting money and things like that. And my point was that if we're talking campaign violations, campaign finance violations, those are initiated by a written report under oath to the commission, and that it would be confidential. And I just wondered how a commissioner had the license to go about doing what he had done. So now Andrew has asked that Ken be removed and for bias, and here's how Ken winds up his statement to the paper. Any request for suspension of a commissioner, Joaquin Paris said, is the result of ulterior motives. And then he said, I'm pissed. I really am. And I'm too old to be pissed. So I guess we have a new defense that anyone who is accused of bias could bring before the commission that would determine that bias. Is that the way you read it, Andrew?
Well, Bob, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. Fascinating show. And yeah, I mean, just his final statement, I'm pissed, just proves that, my mom told me you shouldn't make decisions when you're angry. And I think Ken kind of summed it up. Ken kind of summed up, his thoughts on the write-in campaign and our efforts to, put an alternative to the two candidates that are out there right now, that being Frank and Alicia, and we just hope that as we get closer, we hope that the commission sees that they said there would be one Democrat, one Republican, and one independent, which is Patrick Seville, that will be looking at each and every write-in vote that's coming in, and to determine or try and figure out the intent of the voter. And that one person should not be Ken Paris, because he's fed up, and definitely there's just definite bias, and he said it. I mean, there's so many instances of that, but I wanted to call in for that. And I mean, I was been listening to your show since the beginning, and I mean, I agree with Jack. That the university, which is the leading institution of higher education in the Western Pacific, that is open to all, perspectives and ideas, doesn't allow this, very credible write-in candidate to speak. I think it kind of says a lot about, what's going on over there at the university, and maybe could be the fear of just the new administrators over there. And how, they didn't want to maybe piss off the powers that be. They're big donors. I mean, after all, I think his office is in the Leon Guerrero building, or the family building. So, it's just disappointing. And I think, maybe, my last comment would just go to the Lou video, where, she I think it's not only xenophobic or ethnocentric or or even racist, but I think it's kind of exclusionary. You know, it's almost, I think, snobbery to such an extent that, you know, when she says words like our, you know, my, you know, or our people, not the people, but our, and this is my island, and things like that. I think it kind of says a lot about the character of an individual in times of great pressure, you know. And you see Kim Perez, you know, with him being pissed off. You see Lou coming out and saying having these gaffes, as you said. I don't think it's a gaffe. I think this is the true, you know, the true character of the individual in times of great stress and trouble that they're going through. And you know, I just hope that the people are able to kind of see that and really go in there and make up their mind. And I think that's why me and Ken, or Ken and I, you know, wanted to push this, because, you know, we can't settle for the, you know, for the two that are there. I mean, you know, again, I see no difference between the gun grabber and the money grabber. So, you know, Bob, thanks for your show. I mean, it's very different from the other shows that are out there. Not Ray in the morning. Ray's all right. You're much better.
Yeah, just set your dial to 93.3 in the morning and leave it there. You needn't touch it again, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, you know, Tall Tales is the top-rated afternoon talk radio FM talk show in the Western Pacific, right, Andrea?
I've heard that somewhere before, Bob. I've heard that somewhere before, and you know, it's true, man. It's true. So thank you for the time and allowing me to kind of just put that out there. And you know, I didn't write that letter to the commission asking them to remove or suspend Kin without, you know, actually seeing, you know, and listening to his rhetoric ever since we first announced. And you know, I waited all this time just to kind of see if, okay, this is, you know, I know it's a partisan board and this and that and everything, but we did the write-in, you know, because it's a lawfully provided, you know, option for the people, and you should support that as a commission member, and not try and downgrade or push away, you know, an option that is given to the people by law. It's just ridiculous, you know.
How did the commission rule on your request? I guess they just referred it to council and that was it.
Yeah. Alice, I believe read you know, my not my whole letter, but kind of like the gist of my letter, presented to the board, and she's like, "Oh no, this is a no for me." And then I believe one of the Republican commission members said, "Well, maybe we need to put it to council," and then Pat'sville agreed, and then the legal counsel agreed, and they decided to go in that direction. But you know, we also see that. You know, I'm not optimistic. I don't even, you know, I wouldn't put anything, you know, any money down on them doing anything about it. But I think it's important that the people really keep an eye on this board that really is not there for the people, but there for the parties. And there's something kind of wrong with that, because I know, you know, in a lot of states you have, you know, county clerks and state commission. State commission members that are elected, I guess, or even the state solicitor, something like that. They have different commissions or boards that handle this type of stuff. Not the party, you know, the party rank and file that go in there and then make decisions that are, you know, that basically affect the entire island. So this is his decision, and his judgment is important, because it doesn't just affect, you know, a small group of people. It affects everybody. And Kim's going to come out there and make a decision when he's really pissed and he really hates us. And why are we doing this? And everyone, you know, all the things that he said about, you know, on the air, oh, anybody who votes for the writing is wasting their time. I mean, that type of rhetoric is not conducive to a board that is supposed to provide a fair, you know, a fair election for the people of Guam. There's something wrong with that. So we decided to call him out on that.
Well, I'm glad you did, because you are active and an active and informed citizen, and you understand that you have a duty because of that. So thanks for calling in, Andrea. I hope you can be listening tomorrow, okay?
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Bob, for the time. Have a good evening.
All right. So here we are at the end of another Tall Tales. Adios, hasta Gupa.